New Zealand. In just a bit, some news here in the United States. President Trump is poised to hand down the first veto of his presidency after the approved the resolution to overturn his national emergency declaration on the border wall. Lawmakers in the Senate approved the rebuke of the president yesterday in a vote of 59 to 41. Before the vote, 9 Republicans had said they would support the measure, but that figure grew when Senators Marco Rubio, Roy Blunt, and Roger Wicker all got on board, raising the total number of Republicans voting in favor of the bill and against the president to 12. One Republican who did not end up voting yes, Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, who reversed course just minutes before the vote and stood by the president after previously expressing his support of the bill. Despite the increased Republican support to overturn the president's declaration, Senate Democrats still are short of the 67 votes that would be needed to override a veto by President Trump. It should also be noted that of the 22 Republican Senate seats up for grabs in 2020, all but Susan Collins of Maine stood with the president on this matter. Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee did vote to rebuke Trump, but he is not running for re-election next year. So, Jennifer Rubin, your reaction here, I saw some disappointment, not just from you and Noah, but other conservatives online, in people like Senator Ben Sasse and others who say they are constitutional conservatives here.
I am disappointed but not surprised. I think this is sort of peak supineness for the Republicans. This is what we have seen, which is the moral and intellectual corruption of the Republican Party, that people have really tossed whatever principles they had, whatever standards they had, and they will twist themselves like a pretzel to justify anything that will keep them in line with the president. And when you have someone like Ben Sasse, who clearly knows better, who writes books about character, about the Constitution, and he puts out really a sort of a pathetic written statement justifying weekly this vote, you know that that's just a corrupted soul. And what is the purpose, really, if you're going to sell your and remain in the Senate to literally consign your powers, consign your obligations to the executive branch? What really is the purpose? So on one hand, I suppose I'm pleased that you can find 12 souls there that are not beyond redemption. But it's pathetic that the rest of them should go down this road. And I think they will pay a political price. You have people like Cory Gardner. You have people like Thom Tillis, who really just made a fool of himself in this reversal, which is sort of mind-numbing. You have people like Joni Ernst. There are many people who are going to be on the ballot in 2020. And though no one vote, and perhaps a vote 18 months ahead of the election is too much, I think the perception is that these people have been weak. They have capitulated. They have been enabled. And depending upon who the top of the ticket is, we could see some really tremendous numbers in the Senate for the Democrats as well.
No, the most interesting case to me is Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina. He wrote an op-ed on February 25th in the Washington Post. He gave a speech on the floor of the Senate explaining why they have to vote. Senators must vote. If you're a true conservative, you must vote to knock down this declaration of national emergency. He called himself a steward of the Article I branch to preserve the separation of powers, to curb the kind of executive overreach Congress has allowed to fester for the better part of the past century. I stood by that principle during the Obama administration, he wrote, and I stand by it now. And yet yesterday, he didn't put in his vote the way he'd been speaking and lecturing his colleagues.
Yeah, interesting is one word to say about this. The kind of craven capitulatory instinct that Jennifer was just talking about there is most evident in Senator Tillis. It is extremely disappointing. He talked about how intellectual honesty compelled him to take this very early stand against this national emergency, and then put out a statement yesterday in which nothing changed, in which Mike Lee put forward an attempt to create a consensus around changing these laws after the fact, and the president said no, and Mike Lee said, okay, I'm off ship. And a lot of other Republicans went with him. Thom Tillis moved. He said, well, okay, at least the president told me he would support an effort to amend the laws so that a future leftist president couldn't corrupt the Constitution in the manner that he has, and that satisfied me. You know, Ben Sasse's move here is disappointing, but if it's motivated by politics, at least it's motivated by politics. You can see that. There's, you know, he's up in 2020. Everybody, the only person who voted against this who is up in 2020 is Sue Collins. Everybody else said no. You can understand a politician being a politician as unsatisfactory as it is. lecturing us to this extent is absolutely distasteful.
Tom, by the way, we should point out, Danny, Tom Tillis heard the footsteps of a primary challenge as well within the last week, explicitly from people who said, I'm going to run against you if you vote against the president.
We sometimes forget that senators are human beings. Now, to understand, I wouldn't think anything else. These people, this is their livelihood. They make a couple $100,000 a year. This is their raison d'etre to have power. It's a process vote. And if most of us were, and I know everybody wants to think of themselves as heroes. If at the end of the day, your job, your livelihood, your family's well-being was on the line, and if I need to make a vote, at the end of the day, this is not a vote on Obamacare, this is not a vote on a issue, it's a process vote. Of course they're going to vote this way. We expect them to be superheroes.
Not of course, though.
Okay, let me finish, guys.
No.
We can't.
12
it wasn't a process.
Yeah, but they're not
either.
being primaried. Okay, you just, in order for us to understand and just please let me finish. To understand and not be surprised and not sit intellectually and go, how could they do it? They're protecting their jobs as I believe
that's
95.
the problem.
Okay,
but it's reality, and to think anything else, we're looking for superheroes that don't exist.
No.
I get
we're
that
not.
point,
There were
but I
12
get that
Republicans
point,
that
Donnie.
affected.
Yeah, by the way, were
No,
any of them being primaried coming up? No.
No,
That's
no.
the difference,
But
obviously.
what you're describing is rationalization, the notion that I can do more good on the inside than on the outside.
We should sit around and go, oh my
just-
God, how do we do
Go ahead,
it?
Just one
Susan.
point. I understand what you're saying, Donnie, but here's the thing. They made that with a man in Donald Trump that you can't trust him to keep his word. So why would you make that kind of deal with that kind of man, knowing you cannot trust
Because
him?
you lose
He
your
will
job
not be-
otherwise.
Well,
You
they
know,
made
John,
it
John,
anyway.
it's
So
This is the moral. This is the moral nihilism that has brought us to Donald Trump. The notion that, well, what do you expect? Politicians are going to be politicians? No. I mean, this is a complete loss of understanding and appreciation that these people are in national service. And my God, Ben Sasse can't go get a job someplace else. What a comment on that is. And you know what? There's some things you don't do to keep your job. You don't support people who are malicious. You don't support a candidate who's tearing down the Constitution.
Right.
Come on. We do expect more of these
Jennifer,
people.
let me-
And the fact there are 12 who did it should tell you something, and there are 13 in the House. All of them are going to be up on the
Jennifer, that's
election.
my point. Isn't it bizarre that the 12 brave people are not being primaried? So, and by the way, if those people being
believe me,
that's not the case.
That is
am
the case,
not-
other than Susan
I'm not
Collins.
heralding them. I am saying that the rest of them don't deserve to be in office. I think we have to raise our standards. And the way we got Donald Trump was thinking like this, thinking, well, they're all craven. This guy at least is my bully. He's my liar. He's my cheat. And we cannot think that way. We have to raise our sights. We have to recover some value system to our democracy. And I will rail until my last breath against a rationalization that says, well, they're just keeping their jobs.
It's not.
That is wrong.
You're not defending it. You're explaining it.
I'm not telling you not to rail. Obviously, we all have the same similar moral compass. I'm telling you, in order for us to properly analyze and try and fix and try and understand, you have to not take away the basic human reality and not be naive and not think that the Democrats would have done the same thing in
I'm
a
not
process vote
naive.
like that.
I'm not
going to change. It's human beings not going to change.
No,
That's
I'm
it.
not naive. I'm saying that we shouldn't accept that. That's unacceptable. Of course they're craven. Of course they're